Well, everybody knows war is hell. Remember, you heard it here last.
War isn't hell. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
How do you figure that, Hawkeye?
Easy, Father. Tell me, who goes to hell?
Sinners, I believe.
Exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. But war is chock full of them.
MASH made war feel funny without ever pretending war was harmless. And that's exactly why this story sounds so backwards. The one plot that truly rattled the network was not about blood, death, or mutiny. It was about Hawkeye's love life getting a little too ambitious. In pop culture, the show stands for smart comedy with a gut punch underneath, the kind of series you watch for a laugh and then sit quietly through the credits. It became a national habit, ran far longer than the war it portrayed, and ended with a finale watched by 121.6 million people. Reruns kept it alive for decades, which is why the episodes still feel like shared memories you can quote at dinner. Yet behind the laughs was a constant tug-of-war with network standards, and one script was refused before cameras rolled. Today we're talking about the MASH episode that was effectively banned, and the reason why is obvious. A hit show with invisible rules.
Look at this random arrangement, Major.
I'm looking.
The kidney beans have slopped over from the kidney bean compartment into the applesauce compartment. The dehydrated potatoes are in every compartment.
It's no wonder I never have an appetite.
Sergeant, I want standardization of compartment usage. When I look down a table at a row of trays, I want to see beans, 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 beans. Potatoes, potatoes, potatoes. Applesauce, applesauce, applesauce. You got that?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, what?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If you thought Private Igor had it bad in that chow line scene, getting scolded over tray compartments like a stray pea could somehow start World War III, just wait until you see the kind of rules the network tried to enforce on the show itself. MASH aired on CBS from 1972 to 83 and somehow lasted far longer than the Korean War it portrayed. Viewers showed up for the jokes, but they stayed because the 407 7th could feel like a real workplace under impossible pressure, full of smart people trying to stay human while everything around them fell apart. The show's cultural footprint is almost unreal. It ran for 11 seasons, became a staple of reruns, and finished with a finale that drew a record-breaking audience for scripted television. That kind of popularity can make a series look untouchable from the outside, almost like a public utility. From the inside, it was still network TV. There were standards departments, advertisers to please, and executives who worried about backlash from a small but loud slice of the public. Television was full of cultural tripwires, and each era had its own list of subjects that could trigger angry mail. Even when a show earned awards and loyal fans, it could still be told, not that. As the series matured, it leaned harder into the uglier realities of war. It touched on trauma, desperation, and the ways conflict twists ethics, often carried by Alan Alda, and a cast that could sell jokes one minute and grief the next. Yet the most serious topics were not always the ones that triggered panic upstairs. Hawkeye could be a brilliant surgeon and a decent friend, but he was also, at times, an incorrigible flirt who treated romance like a competitive sport. The show often played that for laughs, leaning into his confidence and his constant need to charm. And you can see that vibe in the way he talks when he gets fixated on someone like Lieutenant Dish. It's light, suggestive, and meant to feel harmless, even when it's obviously pushing the line. The story that never made it to air was an unproduced script called Hawkeye on the Double. The premise was straightforward. Hawkeye Pierce was meant to be seeing two nurses at the same time and trying to juggle both relationships without them finding out about each other. On paper, it was classic sitcom machinery. One character makes a selfish choice, the schedule gets complicated, the lies pile up, and the comedy comes from close calls and frantic improvising. In a wartime hospital, that kind of plot can also feel a little too breezy, which is exactly the kind of thing that can make executives uneasy, especially when it centers on romance instead of the usual mix of medicine and survival. There was no plan for explicit scenes, nudity, or shock dialogue. The humor would have lived in implication, misunderstandings, and Hawkeye's ego catching up with him as he tries to keep two separate stories straight at once. But for the network, the suggestion was the problem. A doctor juggling two relationships was judged too controversial for primetime, even if nothing graphic ever appeared on screen. It was not a case of trimming a scene or swapping a line. The idea itself was treated as a line that could not be crossed in front of a family audience. Why sex beat violence as a taboo.
I've been on fire all day, just the
sight of you and I want to do crazy things.
Okay, where do we start?
Oh, anyway. What are you doing here?
I'm taking a survey for the Peeping Times of America.
You foul-minded, dirty, sneaking
Not
swine!
only that, but Dish wants you in post-op on the double.
Oh, you haven't heard the last of this?
I bet I have.
To understand the network's refusal, it helps to remember how skittish broadcast TV could be about basic adult reality. Even single words could be treated as unacceptable. At one point, the word virgin was considered too risky to air and was cut from an episode. Networks also treated topics like pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases as if mentioning them would contaminate the living room. That caution created a strange split. By the late 1970s, plenty of viewers were already aware of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but broadcast TV still acted like it had to pretend otherwise. Scripted primetime often behaved as if certain subjects did not exist. MASH made the split feel even stranger because it lived in a hospital. People were wounded, stitched up, and emotionally wrecked. The show could talk about death, fear, and moral compromise. Yet a romantic plot could still be labeled dangerous. So the point was never that audiences were clueless. The point was that networks tried to manage image. They feared being accused of endorsing messy behavior, even while airing stories where characters dealt with far messier consequences, including violence that was shown more directly. How the show adapted and kept its edge. The denied script did not derail the series. Writers moved on quickly, and the show kept finding stories that were sharp, funny, and sometimes uncomfortable in the best way. If anything, the refusal simply taught the staff where one particular tripwire was located. Long-running shows learn how to test boundaries without triggering a shutdown. A joke can be phrased a little differently, a scene can imply more than it shows, and a risky idea can be redirected into a safer shape. MASH writers were known to slip in troublesome bits anyway, partly to tease censors, and partly to keep the work from getting too polite. Creative leadership mattered here. Larry Gelbart helped set a tone that could hold comedy and despair in the same hand, and the writers could pivot from farce to moral conflict without losing the audience. That flexibility let the show keep evolving when certain doors were closed. Over time, networks sometimes loosen once they trust a hit. The sense from the creative side was that even after the rejected script, the network largely recognized what the show could do and backed off. But the fact that this plot was refused outright shows how firm the sexual taboo still was, even late in the era. Why the reason still feels obvious.
Let me see that. BJ. BJ. Who would name their kid BJ?
My mother, B. Honeycutt, and my father, J. Honeycutt. B.J.
Oh, sure. Now I get it. B and J. BJ. You honestly expect me to buy that cockamamie story? Now, what does it stand for?
Anything you want.
The missing episode also fits into the bigger story of how the series negotiated changing norms. Some early material carried problems the show later tried to avoid, including a black surgeon character whose nickname was too racist to responsibly use, plus a mistaken belief about who served on the front lines. Those choices illustrate a show learning in public, sometimes correcting course, sometimes reflecting the limits of its moment. The unmade sex farce is another kind of limit, not from the writers, but from the gatekeepers who controlled the schedule. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes decision that rarely becomes visible, which is why it keeps getting repeated. It also reveals a self-policing system. A few people could treat their own discomfort as a national standard, then protect that standard by blocking a script before it ever became an episode. When fans call it banned, they're reacting to that hard stop and the sense of a missing chapter. Which brings us back to the obvious reason. Primetime could stomach war, pain, and death as serious television, but it still panicked over sexual behavior that might look morally complicated. The 407 7th could patch up bodies and joke through despair, but it couldn't show one doctor trying to date two nurses. Now it's time to hear from you. Does this storyline still feel scandalous? Was it right to not have it on the air at that time? Let us know in the comments section below.